Stocks closed mixed as Wall Street with the Dow Jones and S&P 500 gaining while the Nasdaq closes losses. Nvidia closes lower in extended trade even as earnings beat expectations and guidance remains strong. Stocks in Asia Pacific trade largely lower with GIFT Nifty, however, suggesting a higher start for the Indian markets. Crude prices tick lower. Brent trades around the $73 a barrel mark following a higher than expected U.S. crude inventory, although escalations in the Russia and Ukraine war cap the losses. Gold gains for the third straight day following escalations in tensions between the West and Russia. SEBI's measures to curb excessive speculation in F&O segment comes into effect today. The market regulator has also proposed tightening rules for SMEs to list on Dalal Street. Adani Group's Gautam Adani gets indicted in a New York federal court on charges of bribery and fraud. Adani and 7 other defendants are accused of being part of a scheme to pay over $250 million to Indian government officials to obtain solar energy contracts. The US SEC has also charged 3 senior executives for orchestrating a bribery scheme. Polling in Maharashtra sees 65% of a voter turnout to cast their ballot, while Jharkhand sees 68% turnout. Most exit polls suggest a close finish in Maharashtra with a slight advantage to BJP. Jharkhand too is expected to see a close fight. Hello, good morning. You have tuned into Power Breakfast on CNBC-TV18. I'm Winnie Motiwala in the Mumbai News Centre. Yesterday surely was a holiday in Maharashtra. Markets were off, but in the last 30 minutes of trade on Tuesday, we saw a fall coming in. So let's look at how the Asian markets are actually panning up today. Bit of a muted start that we are seeing coming in. Not much of an excitement there. The Taiwanese index down 0.4%, Hang Seng down 0.1% in trade. So most of them today that you're seeing have opened up in the red. The US market also, like I was saying before, that we are seeing S&P 500 as well as a Dow that closed positive, but the negative handover coming in from Nasdaq because of Nvidia, that was a concern that we were watching out for. So yes, Asia markets also have opened up flat, nothing exciting there. Most of them are in the red. And GIFT Nifty, what is that suggesting? A mild bit of a positive start that is indicated for the Indian markets. As of now, when you're looking at the GIFT Nifty, 30 points uptick. So muted to positive start. Let's see where that actually shapes up. Asian market handover, not much of an excitement there. India is something that we're watching out for. Implied open indicating 30 points uptick as of now for the Indian markets. But let's look at the US markets and Wall Street. That was something that we saw mixed close coming in there. S&P 500 ending the trading session flat on the back of Nvidia's strong third quarter numbers that we saw coming in. What we also saw that Dow Jones that garnered close to 140 points while Nasdaq actually saw a bit of a slip coming in. So what is interesting to watch out for is that Nasdaq slipped 21 points. Earnings of the chipmaker Nvidia, that was in Q3 what we were watching out for, almost doubling in terms of revenue from last year. Revenue surged 94% on the back of strong AI demand that we saw coming in. And overall, the consumer giant Target, that missed their numbers in Q3 in terms of earnings estimate, leading to shares see a dip of over 20%. So yes, that's how we saw the US markets closing. But US financial sector, that saw an uptick of 6%. And this is since the post-election that we were watching out for. Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon comments on the election impact on financial sector and regulatory actions under the new administration. Listen in.
I think one of the things the market is saying at the moment, and it's not just financial services, is that there's a belief that this administration will pare back the level of regulation, which is definitely a pro-growth agenda. Certainly for financial services, the level of regulatory oversight grew. I think it's important to have a good regulatory structure for the financial services industry, but it can go too far. And we actually want these companies that are an engine of growth and innovation in the United States. We want these companies to be able to grow, to succeed, et cetera. So it's super important that we get the regulatory balance right. I think it's pushed too far, and I think the market is basically saying they think the new administration will bring it back to a place that's more sensible.
Okay, that's all the global action that we have this morning. But how is all that actually going to be impacting our Indian markets? What are the cues that we are picking up? Given that yesterday we have seen a bit of a fall, the last trading session, that's Tuesday, we had seen a bit of a fall coming in. We have our research team joining in with us. We have Hormaz as well as Sudarshan here. Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for joining in with us this morning. Hormaz, let me start with you. Tuesday, last 30 minutes, that gave us a scare because of the geopolitical tensions. But today, what is the setup looking like?
Good morning, Vinny, and you can categorize that session into two parts, right? Before 3 p.m. and after 3 p.m. Before 3 p.m. it was all hunky-dory. We could have said that the week has been progressing well for the index. Finally, the bulls are staging a comeback, but then Ukraine had to play spoil sport. They launched some missiles into Russia, and that escalated some geopolitical tensions as well. And the Nifty fell almost 250 points from the highs of the day in just half an hour. In those last 30 minutes, the Nifty Bank 2 fell 350 points. So was the reaction in the similar reaction in the broader markets as well. And if that was not enough, even yesterday the Ukraine also launched the UK made Storm Shadow missiles on Russia on Wednesday, and Russia lowered its threshold for a nuclear response as well. So geopolitical tensions remain elevated, and that could act as a potential dampener to any possible recovery on the Nifty. But in hindsight, the Nifty still managed to snap a 7-day losing streak, managed to hold on to that 23,500 level on the downside. What further dragged the indices lower was a fall in Reliance Industries, PSU banks, L&T and others as well. And the PSU index was the outperformer. That held on to some of its gains as well. Now, what can add to the volatility other than geopolitical factors is the potential results from Nvidia, which was you can say a bad quarter considering the elevated expectations. Most of the exit polls are giving a slight edge to the Mahayuti, but a hung assembly is also under factor. And of course, today being the Nifty weekly expiry, that will also be in focus. We watch out for defense stocks because the defense secretary said yesterday that they will increase defense spending locally to from 60 to 75% this year. So important levels to watch, of course, 23,500 on the downside for the Nifty, and of course Tuesday's high of 23,780, and for the Nifty Bank it will be 51,000 on the upside that you need to watch out for. For now, the GIFT Nifty, which was at one point almost 80 points higher, is now almost flat. So it is a cautious start that is in the offing for our own markets as well.
Okay, cautious start is what we're keeping an eye out on. Thanks so much for that, Hormaz. But what are the important stocks that we're keeping on our radar today? Let me start with that. NLC India, they are to invest around 3,720 crores, and this is for various renewable projects. They will be acquiring stake of NRIL for transferring renewable assets to NRIL under asset monetization scheme and plan that they have. The net book value for the RE assets are around 6,263 crores at the end of September, 30th September 2024. Garden Reach, they've signed a contract worth around 226 crores with the West Bengal government. Keep an eye on that one. Dr. Reddy's US FDA had carried out an inspection in November on the company. Now, this is in the Bolaram facility in Hyderabad. They've received 7 observations in a Form 483. More details of that is something that we'll be watching out for. Tata Power, that's in focus. They partnered with Bhutan's Druk Green Power Corporation for developing around 5,000 megawatt of clean energy projects in Bhutan. We have Godrej Properties, that's also in focus. They're acquiring a 53 crore land in Kolkata. Estimated potential revenue from this is going to be nearly around 500 crores. Let's keep an eye out on UPL as well. They have signed an agreement with Alpha Wave Global for investment of worth around $350 million. So keep an eye on that. PSP projects, and this is a CNBC news break confirmed. Adani Infra is to acquire 30.0% stake in PSP projects from one of its founders for around 685 crores. This is going to be via open offer. So keeping an eye out on all these stocks in trade today. But let's move on, and finally we have Sudarshan also, who's waiting by to tell us what's going to happen in the world of F&O. Weekly expiry coming in, Sudarshan. Good morning.
Morning, Vinny. So on Tuesday, it looked like a good day of trade until the last hour sell-off came, and at the end, we saw that market closing in the green but sharply off highs. And for today also, GIFT Nifty now is indicating a subdued start for us. Talking about the cash market flows on Tuesday, FIs continue to sell. They have been selling for last 36 sessions, and on Tuesday, they have sold more than rupees 3,400 crore, while DIs have bought nearly 2,800 crore. The short covering that we saw on Tuesday was reflected in the futures data. We saw FIs net buy figure of almost rupees 2,000 crore, and they have added long contracts of almost 1,900, and they have covered short positions of almost 25,000 contracts. And with this, FI's long exposure now increased to 26%, and on the client side, long exposure is now at 69%. On the option front, 23,750 call has seen addition of more than 14 lakh shares, and the put side, 23,500 put has seen addition of almost 4 lakh shares. With this important levels for Nifty, support is now seen somewhere around 23,315. And resistance is now at 23,800. One stock that has entered in the band is IGL.
Okay, so Darshan, thank you so much for that. But on that note, let's slip into a very short break. Don't go anywhere. More news and updates after the break. Welcome back. You're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV18. Let's move on. Other than food price inflation is not a challenge. That's the word coming in from the DEA Secretary Ajay Seth and speaking to CNBC TV18 at FICCI's annual general meet. He also added that while there could be some undershooting of India's FY25 capex, it would still exceed last year's capex. Listen in.
We started the year with estimates in the economic survey is 6.5 to 7% growth, and I see that we are still very much in that zone. As far as inflation is concerned, yes, food prices has been a problem area, and that has been largely because of the extreme continuing rainfall, unusually long when it has continued this year. But other than the food prices, inflation is not a challenge. Last year, the capital expenditure by Government of India was 9.5 lakh crore. This year, it was budgeted about 11.1, and there may be some undershooting, but I do expect that will be a significant increase over last year. So while some sectors are a bit slow, but on the other hand, a few other sectors, there are additional demands coming up.
Okay, and speaking at the same event, the Defence Secretary Rajesh Kumar Singh says India's defence industry is at an inflection point and 75% of India's current defence capital expenditure is now directed towards domestic procurement. Listen in.
Our focus increasingly has been on ensuring that we spend our capex within this country. The ratio we originally set out 3 years back was about 60% to be spent within India, 40% outside. The ratio for the current year has now been enhanced further to 75%. And we intend to double down on that indigenization exercise that we are doing. This is one sector where there will be a lot of expenditure happening, about $20 to $25 billion per year over the next 10 years.
Okay, on that note, we're going to slip into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. After the break, we'll be talking about what's happening in the world of commodities. So stay tuned in.
Five or 6 year period when I was at SoftBank, so much happened. SoftBank could have bought NVIDIA for $83 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, over $3 trillion today.
Your bullshit meter went off when you met Adam Newman, and you couldn't believe why Masa was willing to bet all of this money on WeWork.
Adam came along at a time when the major SoftBank commitments were made, at a time when Masa had a problem, which is, how am I going to put this amount of money to work? That's when the mistakes were made.
The book's called The Money Trap, and it's almost like the Hotel California-esque kind of feeling where you can check out whenever you want to, but you can never really
No, that's
leave.
exactly. People see that title and their reaction is, I immediately know what you mean. I'm in the money trap. And you need an extraordinary degree of conviction to break away. Money and power, people will do a lot of things. And it's the oldest story in the world, right? So just be aware when the stakes are high, it's not for the faint-hearted.
Welcome back. You're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC-TV18. And let's move on now. Adani Group's Gautam Adani has been indicted in the New York Federal Court on charges of bribery and fraud. The US SEC has also accused the group of fraud. Hormaz is joining in with us to give us more details on this one. Good morning, Hormaz.
Morning, and more news coming in on the Adani Group after the US District Court and the US SEC both have come out with their respective orders. I'll start off with what the US District Court has had to say. And the first thing that they say is in or about and between 2020 and 2024, senior executives of an Indian renewable energy company, which was a portfolio company of an Indian conglomerate and issuer company that operated in the renewables energy sector, whose securities were traded on the US exchanges, and that issuer's largest shareholder, who is a Canadian institutional investor, participated in a scheme to bribe Indian government officials to ensure execution of lucrative solar energy supply contracts with the Indian government entities. Now, during the same period, senior executives of this Indian renewable energy company conspired to misrepresent the company's anti-bribery practices to US-based investors and international financial institutions, and concealed from those same investors and institutions their bribery of Indian government officials to obtain billions of dollars in financing for green energy projects, including the corrupt solar energy supply contracts. Now, and lastly, what the court order says is that in addition, senior executives of the issuer company and its Canadian institutional investor conspired to obstruct the US state government's the government's investigation into the bribery scheme. That's what the US District Court has had to say. And who does the District Court order name? It names Gautam Adani, the chairman of the Adani Group. It names Sagar Adani, the executive director of the Adani Green Energy. Vineet Jain, the MD and CEO of Adani Green Energy. Ranjit Gupta was a former CEO at Azure Power. Cyril Sabanis, a former Azure board member. And it also names three other individuals, Saurabh Agarwal, Deepak Malhotra, and Rupesh Agarwal. Now, in addition to this, the US Securities Exchange Commission has also come out with an order of its own. And it says that Gautam and Sagar Adani orchestrated a bribery scheme that involved paying or promising to pay the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes to Indian government officials to secure their commitment to purchase energy at above market rates that would benefit Adani Green Energy and Azure Power. And they also say that, as alleged, Gautam and Sagar Adani were engaged in the bribery scheme during a September 2021 note offering by Adani Green that raised $750 million, including approximately $175 million from US-based investors, and the Adani Green offering materials including statements about its anti-corruption and anti-bribery efforts that were materially false or misleading in light of Gautam and Sagar Adani's conduct. And that's what the US SEC has said. So Adani Group, the group stocks will remain in focus today because of these orders.
Absolutely, Hormaz. Thanks so much for that. Keeping an eye out on all the Adani Group stocks today. But moving on to some updates from Delhi air pollution. Now, the air control and quality in Delhi is slightly improved but remained in the severe category on Wednesday as a thin blanket of smog covered parts of Delhi, Noida, Ghaziabad, Gurugram and other areas in the NCR region. The 24-hour average AQI recorded daily stood at 419 on Wednesday, down from 444 on Tuesday after touching nearly 500 in the severe plus category earlier on Monday. The Commission for the Air Quality Management has revised the graded response action plan mandating the closure of schools in Delhi and NCR district under stage 3 and stage 4 of the plan. An additional directive under stage 3 of the GRAP now requires the state government to stagger the timings of public office and municipal bodies in Delhi and NCR district. Okay. With that, let's move on and go across to Manisha, who's here to tell us what's happening in the world of commodities. Good morning, Manisha.
Morning, Vinny. Thank you for that. Well, I'll start with the gold prices, which have gained for a third straight day at a one-week highs right now. Well, the war escalation between Ukraine and Russia really seems to be bringing back some safe haven buying when it comes to gold. Also, even as the US dollar is at a one-year high, limiting those gains. But the markets also seem to be under slightly pressure because of the US Fed December rate cut. Probability now seems to be going down. There's a 61% probability of a 25 basis point rate cut and 39% probability of it being kept unchanged. Now, this is what is bothering the markets. But having said that, we are back above $26.50 an ounce in the Asian markets right now. A quick word on crude oil prices, and there is safe haven buying onto this one as well. The escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine have supported this commodity. But on the other side, you have higher production, higher inventories, and low China demand. And that seems to be balancing the market, is the reason we are still trading at around $70 a barrel for the WTI crude prices.
Okay, Manisha, thank you so much for that. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Don't go anywhere. Bazaar Morning Call up next.